Perfectionism. It's like not a bad thing to have, right? It's the classic answer to the job interview question.
So what's your biggest weakness?
My biggest weakness is that I'm a perfectionist. I'm an overachiever. I work too much. I'm a workaholic. And look, I say this as an editor that gets paid to indulge heavily in perfectionist traits like sweating the small stuff and paying attention to details. Perfectionism does more harm than good when producing creative work. It's calculus time, baby. I don't know if you thought you were gonna get this in a creative video, but I love math and this is my video, so buckle up. An asymptote is the theoretical line the graph of a function can closely approach. Zooming right in, the distance between the graph and the asymptote can be infinitesimal, yet it can never touch. Too bad, so sad. As flawed humans, perfection is our very own asymptote that we get to be disappointed by in real life. Accepting perfection is impossible is painful, and yet we must. So should we give up? Of course not. Should we stop striving for excellence? Hell no. Should we, and I hate this icky word, but should we settle for good enough? Yeah, I think we should. This is what Ryan Holiday says in his book, Discipline is Destiny. He says that striving for perfection can be a virtue, but when that striving turns into a vice, it becomes a creative prison. Quick refresher. A virtue is a behavior showing high moral standards and a vice is immoral. So in our case, let's think of virtue as a good habit, a desirable habit that we want. And let's think of vice as a nasty habit, a bad habit that we want to shake. Ryan explains the tragic fate of greats across many fields was sealed when their perfectionism turned from virtue to vice. Their success is built on their incredibly high standards, often higher than anyone, including the audience or the market, could demand. Like Ash Ketchum, they wanted to be the very best, like no one ever was. But when their perfectionism turned into a vice, it stopped them from enjoying what they had achieved, and it made it increasingly difficult to produce the next thing. Because it's never good enough, because there's always more that you can do, and because it doesn't measure up to what they did last time. You may have heard of Leonardo da Vinci, one of the greatest thinkers in human history, and also famous for being unreliable when it came to finishing commissions. Some experts argue that Da Vinci didn't even see the Mona Lisa as finished when he died in 1519. I mean, he didn't even sign it or date it. Leonardo had trouble stopping himself from continuing to make adjustments to paintings even years after he started, even though they may have looked very much complete to the outside world. He's even attributed with saying, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." He could have done with listening to Aussie artist Struthless, you know? If Struthy could jump in a time machine and go back 500 years. Struthless has a beautiful video on perfectionism. You should check that out. In it, he talks about the 70% rule. He says to aim for 70%, not 100% when it comes to your projects. Your percentage may vary, but whatever gets you starting and ultimately completing your work. The 70% rule works for a few reasons. It helps you get started. It lowers the barrier to entry. Can you make the best song in the world? Probably not. Tenacious D already did that. Can you make a decent song? Yeah, probably.
Stuck in a room. I took a big breath.
The 70% rule also works because of the law of diminishing returns. There is a point at which adding more stuff, like time and effort and money to our project will not result in a proportionate increase in the quality of our final product. You can keep adding more color, but it's just gonna turn brown. And finally, the 70% rule works because it helps you finish your projects. As Sir Struthless says, your body of work is only as good as the projects you finish. There will always be something more you can do. Add another edit, tweak, tinker, correct, polish, touch up, rearrange. The adjustments are limitless. But we must finish our projects. The perfect project that is never finished is a failure. It's the same as never doing it at all, and that is freaking heartbreaking. This is a huge unlock for me. Come back, Ryan Holiday. He says, perfect is not just the enemy of good, but it's the enemy of everything that might come after. If you get stuck, your potential does. This is why finishing is itself an achievement, an act of monumental discipline that must happen. This creation right now may not be the best thing that you've ever made, but it might be a stepping stone to the best thing that you'll ever make. To me, this is most obvious with music because nobody produces 100% certified bangers every single time. Think of one of your favorite bands. Think of an album that you like. Within that album, you have standout singles. Now, think about their entire discography. Within that whole collection, you have amazing, game-changing albums. So my janky analogy is you could need a Beatles for Sale to get to a Sgt. Pepper's. You might need a Yellow Submarine to reach your Abbey Road. You don't know what this moment is. Is it a standout or is it a stepping stone? You cannot know. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. Thanks, Steve-O. Because we're idiots. That's why. I'm joking. Most of the time, when we engage in these perfectionist behaviors, it's because we're trying to avoid an unpleasant or embarrassing or shameful outcome, especially if that kind of negative emotion is something that we've experienced in the past. It could be fear of failure, an excessive need for control, a lack of flexibility that whirs that perfection machine into action. You think, if I do this project perfectly, everybody will love it. Nobody will make a shitty comment. Nobody will criticize it in any way about anything. You think, if I act, no. Better yet, if I become the perfect spouse, I will never have a disagreement with my partner again. You think, if I throw the perfect event, everybody will come and everybody will have the best time.
And I will be the greatest friend of all time.
If everything is perfect, then nothing bad can ever happen. This psychology of avoiding unpleasantness and seeking validation or certainty often underpins perfectionism. Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, the book that I fell asleep to on at least half the nights in 2022, talks about perfectionism in relation to our finitude. This funny sounding but totally appropriate word means our human state of having a limit, our time, and an inevitable end, our death. Like I talked about in the last section, we use perfectionism as a strategy of emotional avoidance. Realize, hey, I'm probably not going to be able to produce work at the quality of this ideal fantasy that I have in my mind. It dawns on us that any attempt to bring our ideas into concrete reality inevitably falls short of our dreams. It is excruciating that reality has limitations, that we have limitations. We have limited time, we have limited talent, we have limited resources, we can't control external events, we can't control the actions of people around us. But Mr. Berkman has hope. It's one of the 428 reasons why I love this book. If you're procrastinating on something because you're worried you won't do a good enough job, you can relax. Because judged by the flawless standards of your imagination, you definitely won't do a good enough job. So, you might as well start. And when you get to 70%, call it done.